Picture this. In Canada's largest city, 1 in 10 people are accessing food banks, a significant jump from 1 in 20. This isn't a scene from a dystopian novel, it's a startling reality in Toronto, as highlighted by the Who's Hungry report from the Daily Bread Food Bank. This report unearths a concerning trend. Newcomers to Canada, including international students, are becoming increasingly reliant on food banks. Why, you may ask? The answer lies in the underestimated living costs in this country. Imagine arriving in Canada, the land of opportunities, only to find that the cost of living is much higher than what you were led to believe. It's like diving into a pool, only to realize too late that it's much deeper than it appears. Now let's talk numbers. Food bank visits in Toronto alone have skyrocketed, surpassing 2.5 million in 2023. That's an astronomical figure. It's equivalent to the entire population of Nevada in the United States lining up for food assistance. It's not just the numbers that are alarming, but also the rate at which they're increasing. More and more people are finding themselves in need of food assistance, and the demand is growing at an unprecedented rate. But here's the kicker. Among those turning to food banks are international students. These are individuals who have come to Canada to pursue higher education, but are instead finding themselves grappling with a harsh reality. High tuition fees, soaring living costs, and a lack of adequate financial support are pushing these students towards food banks as a means of survival. It's a stark contrast to the dream of studying abroad, isn't it? But that's the reality many international students are facing. And it's not just a handful of students we're talking about. The influx is significant enough to cause shortages at various food banks and churches in the Brampton area, leading to a situation where resources meant for those truly in need are being stretched thin. Food banks are facing an unprecedented demand, with visits surpassing 2.5 million in 2023. It's time to delve deeper into this issue. Food banks in Brampton, Ontario, have noticed a significant increase in international students seeking free food, leading to shortages. Now let's pause for a moment and mull over that. These food banks, built to support Canadians who are struggling to put food on their table, are facing resource constraints because of misuse. Yes, misuse. You see, there are reports of international students who should have sufficient funds as per their visa requirements, taking advantage of these services. And it's not just a few isolated incidents. It's become so rampant that some have even started sharing tips online about how to exploit the system. There's a particular case of a YouTuber who took it upon himself to teach others how to raid these food banks for free food. Now, let's be clear here. We're not talking about students who are genuinely struggling. We're talking about those with enough funds to support themselves, but who instead choose to exploit a system that's designed to help those in need. And the consequences, they're dire. These food banks, already stretched thin, are struggling to meet the demand. They're having to turn away those who genuinely need their help because their resources are being drained. But how did we get here? How did these students come to believe that it's okay to misuse these services? Well, it seems that misinformation is largely to blame. Agents in other countries and online sources have been promoting the idea of free food in Canada, leading many students to believe that they're entitled to these services. Misinformation spread by agents in other countries and online sources promoting free food in Canada has contributed to this misuse. These actions not only undermine the purpose of food banks, but also pose a threat to their sustainability. It's a situation that calls for immediate correction and collective action. While food banks are stepping in to provide emergency assistance, the shortages are affecting Canadians who genuinely need the support. It's important to remember that food banks are often the last line of defense for those facing food insecurity. Yet, with international students adding to the demand, many Canadians are finding it harder to access these much-needed resources. In the face of rising food costs, many families are grappling with how to make ends meet. Some are even skipping meals to cover their expenses. The reality is, 1 in 10 people in Canada's largest city, Toronto, are now turning to food banks for assistance, a significant increase from 1 in 20 just a year ago. And the problem isn't confined to the city. Across the country, food bank usage has skyrocketed, with visits surpassing 2.5 million in 2023. Inflation is another major factor affecting Canadians' ability to afford food. Statistics reveal a significant increase in food prices, leading to challenges for programs like the Ontario Student Nutrition Program. This price inflation doesn't just strain household budgets, it also has long-term health implications. Many Canadians are struggling to afford nutritious food, which can lead to malnutrition and other health-related issues. Furthermore, the impact of this crisis is not just physical, but also emotional and psychological. The stress of not knowing where your next meal is coming from can have a profound effect on a person's mental well-being. It's a situation that no one should have to face, especially in a country as prosperous as Canada. But the situation is made even more dire when resources intended for struggling Canadian families are being diverted away by those who don't truly need them. While international students certainly face their own challenges, it's important to remember that the system is being strained beyond its intended capacity. In conclusion, it's a harsh reality that rising food prices are straining household budgets and have long-term health implications, particularly for vulnerable populations. As Canadians, we need to address this issue head-on, ensuring that our fellow citizens have access to the resources they need to thrive. After all, a society is measured by how it treats its most vulnerable members. In response to the resource constraints and alleged abuse of the system, some food banks have decided to take a controversial stand. Food banks in Brampton, Ontario, have made the decision to restrict access to international students. This move has been met with a mix of support and criticism, sparking a heated debate on the issue. Supporters of this action argue that it's necessary to ensure that resources are directed towards those who need them most. They point to instances of misuse of the system, with international students who may have sufficient funds taking advantage of the service. It's a tough stance, but they argue it's needed to protect the integrity of the system. However, this decision hasn't been without its critics. They argue that singling out international students based on their visa status is an unfair practice. They point out that many international students are also struggling financially, and that they, too, are part of the community that the food banks serve. This issue highlights the financial struggles faced by both Canadians and international students. It brings to light the systemic issues in the social safety net and the need for a comprehensive solution. This isn't just about food bank usage, but about the larger issue of food insecurity and the financial challenges that many people are facing. The Who's Hungry report from Toronto's Daily Bread Food Bank has shown a sharp rise in food bank usage, with 1 in 10 people accessing food banks. This is a clear indication of the growing food insecurity crisis, and it calls for urgent action. This situation isn't just about the decision of a few food banks. It's a symptom of a larger issue that needs to be addressed at all levels of government. It's a call for policy changes to address the growing food insecurity crisis and to support vulnerable populations. While the situation is complex, it emphasizes the need for potential federal changes to address the situation. It's a call to action for all of us to ensure that everyone in our community has access to safe and healthy food. So what can we do about this? How can we ensure that food banks continue to serve those who are genuinely in need? Well, folks, it's clear that we're facing an urgent crisis. Food banks across the country are struggling under unprecedented demand, with visits surpassing 2.5 million in 2023 alone. That's a stark increase. And it's not just numbers, it's people. People who are skipping meals to cover expenses, who are struggling to make ends meet. This isn't an issue we can sweep under the rug. It's a call to action for government intervention and policy changes at all levels. We need to address the growing food insecurity crisis to ensure that those who are in genuine need have access to these essential services. And it's not just about ensuring the integrity of the food bank system. It's about addressing the underlying issues that lead to food insecurity in the first place. High food prices, inadequate financial support, precarious work, lack of benefits, high shelter costs. These are systemic issues that need systemic solutions, but the government can't do it alone. It's crucial that we, as engaged citizens, raise awareness about this issue. We need to support initiatives aimed at addressing food insecurity, whether that's advocating for policy changes, volunteering at your local food bank, or donating to organizations that are working to combat hunger. And for our international friends, it's important to understand the system and respect it. Canada is a land of opportunity, but it's also a land of community. And that means looking out for each other and ensuring resources are allocated fairly. We can't let the misuse of resources by a few overshadow the real problem, that too many people, including many Canadians, are struggling to feed themselves and their families. It's time for us to stand up, to speak out, and to make a difference. So, if you believe in this cause and want to make a difference, please like, share, and subscribe to spread the word. together we can make a change.